no pressure. Get it?
The pressure is on. Welcome, my name's David Bailey, and today I'm joined by Raj Palsingh, who is the founder of Sky Yoga and on the governing council of community investment of Yoga Unify.
Thanks for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we first met in Koh Phangan, and I was really interested in how you were incorporating a very philosophical approach to yoga. It wasn't just doing the exercises, there was a spiritual aspect to it and a philosophical approach, and you managed to as well kind of have a conversation with the whole class, which is something that I haven't really seen before.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think I like to learn from people who come. It was my first class ever in Koh Phangan, and I was at Om Sound Healing, I think. And I was just curious to know who you all were and what you had come to Kundalini class. I feel like as a yoga teacher, I learn a lot from the people who show up, because it never ceases to amaze me how Kundalini Yoga is so like I don't like to use the word practical, but I'm going to say practically, like practically be incorporated by people of many fields. So I wasn't sure, who was practicing Kundalini, who was new to the practice. You were new to the practice, right?
Yeah, I was.
And I do like to share from my own life experiences, yoga. So generally we will have like a topic, a conversation, and try to delve into the mindset and the spiritual body, as well as the asanas, because you can't escape asanas in yoga. And you came to a master class too that day. I think it was the people at Om Sound Healing. They practiced Kundalini Yoga, and we did a lot of history that day, if I recall correctly. We were talking about the history and the origins of Kundalini Yoga while we were running the class, and talking about how we perceive the world.
And what is the distinction between, I mean, I know there are lots of different types of yoga, but specifically Kundalini Yoga?
Well, I think I don't like separating or dividing like yoga styles into different schools. Like I know that there's an Ashtanga yoga, and a Kundalini yoga, a Hatha yoga, Vinyasa yoga. I think at the end, all yoga is just yoga. It is the connection of the mind, the body, spirit. This is a very basic definition, but when you're in yoga, you are in union with not just yourself, but yourself in how you react with the world around you, and with the universe. So I feel like every form of yoga does that to a large extent. When we talk about Kundalini and yoga, I think all yoga uses or wakes up or uses Kundalini energy, because the energy is ever present. You're just not going to not have it because you're doing a different form of yoga. You are going to activate that energy and move forward in purpose with Kundalini energy. I think the name Kundalini Yoga came about because Yogi Bhajan, found that was just an easy definition for people to name it as, and then it then got copyrighted as Kundalini Yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan. So they have their own separate school of Kundalini Yoga and teacher training and all of that stuff that they do.
Okay. And because I noticed one thing that was, for me, having tried different forms of yoga, there seemed to be a lot of emphasis on the breath. I mean, there is, of course, in normal yoga, or say normal yoga, other forms, but specifically just breath work without doing the poses.
Yeah, there is a lot of Kapalbhati, a breath of fire done, but there's also a lot of mantra that is done in Kundalini Yoga from the first session that you don't necessarily get in other schools of yoga. But I think a lot of Indian yogis like Baba Ramdev or and others, they incorporate mantra and extensive breath work from their first classes as well. So I don't think it's necessarily unique, but I can see because of how yoga is marketed in most parts of the world, where the focus is mostly on physical alignment,
Mm.
that yeah, I could see why it is different.
Okay, so if we were in India practicing yoga, would it be more similar to, I guess,
I
including chanting or breath work?
Yes, I think so, because a lot of yogis over there, like you can see Swami Baba Ramdev on Astha channel. That from the first, he's doing public classes to hundreds of people, and they're doing Breath of Fire, and you can see outside, many of them are first timers, and they're joining in. There's a lot of mantra work, a lot of chant, praying to various uh, depictions of gods and goddesses, devis, devtas. So you have that, and I think that these breath work and all, because you want to bring your pranic body in alignment with your spiritual body, with your mind body, and the mind body is like three different bodies in itself, which we'll talk about, and it's too much of a topic for a podcast. These are like higher educational level of learning, but there's just so many aspects in our body that's happening that we have to bring into alignment in yoga.
Mm.
And it's not just about getting the physical body feeling stretched and great, which is not a bad thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I do a lot of focus on that as well, but um, there's just too many things to put together, basically.
Mm.
So
One of the things that I really liked was the way you broke down layers of perception, because I'm
um,
also someone who's interested in psychology and
right.
the mind, the conscious, the unconscious, social influences. And I really love the way you broke it down into different definitions. Could you speak a little bit on
Yeah.
that?
So I actually learned with with different yogis over the time, and so it's something that I can't recall exactly where. I mean, this layers of perception thing is not, definitely not unique to me, but I had been in a yoga class, actually a master class with um, George Craig McMillan, his name was, and he was here in Thailand back in 2018, and we were doing a workshop, a class called Walking in the Mind of God, which was a very deep sort of yoga class. And while we were running through that, I think um, we were talking about rebirthing, we were talking about various things, and that was the first time that I got introduced to the layers of perception. And I was writing them down as well, but and as I was writing them down, I didn't really number them per se. I don't even think he numbered them per se. um, but we kept coming back to that reference that he started the class with, and
Start recording.
all right, so
And
we're back. So I was doing this workshop with a man from the United States. His name is George Craig McMillan. He's an amazing yogi. He incorporates Kundalini, and I appreciate a lot that I've learned from him over the years. He's one of my like dudes that just anytime I need a reference to, I can go back to whatever workshops I've done with him, or just go talk, chat with him on Facebook. He's very open, very into passing on his knowledge and his wisdom that he's learned over the years. He's an amazing man. Um, we were doing a workshop called Walking in the Mind of God. And before we started the workshop, he started with an introduction explaining how we perceive the world. And I don't recall if he numbered them because my notes don't have numbers on them when I was looking at it initially. But everything we did in the workshop, we kept coming back to these layers of perception. And so afterwards, I was making a class for Wonderfood. Actually, and I just kept looking at this as a note, and I was like, oh wow, okay, I didn't realize it before, but how we talk about, you know, the soul body, our first ideas, and how we look at life from being in the bed and being surrounded with our parents' noises. And I thought, well, actually, this is how, I mean, and it's not set in stone. I put the number six, like I told us in Kapangan, I put the number six because I felt like this breaks it down very nice, and I will share it on this podcast as well. Um, but you know, if you really break into the details, it could be more. And maybe for some people listening, you could find that, well, some of these are interrelated and it could be less. So the number is less important than the fact that we do have layers of perception, and
Yeah.
that everything that we incorporate, you know, through our sensor, our eyes, which is the most obvious, right? Because it's just so many receptors we take in that we build a picture of the world, and we think this is what the world looks like. But now, say to another being from maybe another planet, or even animals that we live around, their color perceptors are not the same like ours, right? And they see, just by seeing, it's a different reality. Then we have hearing, we have, you know, breathing. So we have sensorial things that we perceive the world with, and they are limited. And how we then move forward with this, I was influenced by him, and I was influenced by this book, Yuval Noah Harari. I think that's the author's name. The book *Sapiens*. It's a very popular
Yeah.
book.
You mentioned it. Yeah.
And he was talking about in that book how we create this fictional reality of life. And in Sikh teachings, we talk about Maya, how Maya, or the illusory life, is not an illusion, but the illusory life is built on layers and layers and layers of human activity and human mentality, creating this illusory world that we live in, work in, interact in, and do everything in. And so, how we come to this reality is through our filters of projection, our filters of perception. So now, not everybody is going to believe like in reincarnation. I believe that our soul has been through to the light and back down, and to the light and back down in many rounds. And so the first layer of perception that we come to birth with is whatever fragments that our soul has experienced before we were born. So, you know, when we come into the womb, you know, we have been through many different life cycles, and that soul carries with it maybe some scars, I don't know, maybe some really good experiences, many things that it brings with it. And that becomes the soul layer, what I just numbered it, soul layer. Um, and then we're born, and you know, we're now like a baby, a sponge absorbing everything, right? So how our parents think and talk, and how they see the world at that point becomes our first interaction with the world outside of our us. So whether it's social, political, philosophical, everything that they think and discuss around us becomes us.
Mm.
So that's the second layer, right? And from there, then we go a little bit further, because the parental layer has come from where? It has come from a social surrounding, a group of people, a community, and a culture. So that layer, our cultural conditioning, um, and I take that cultural conditioning all the way up to the national level. So like your state beliefs,
Mm.
like if you were born in China, that cultural conditioning is the Communist Party of China, CCP,
Mm.
Russia in the old days, um, the news media, that all influences that new perception. And that would be layer number three. And then we have layer number four, which is the mythological layer. And I left out the mythological layer um, to later because it has a very far-reaching influence, but not necessarily a direct influence in today's world. Maybe in the 15 or 1600s, it would have been more direct into your community. And maybe for a lot of people on the world today, that is true. But from my experience of life, it has always been there in the backburner.
Mm.
The mythological layers are there, but we've put them further away. So these are the stories of Thor with his mighty warhammer, or Zeus and the Greek gods, or Shiva in the mountains as the great yogi, um, and all the gods and goddesses, and all that. So the morality that comes from this mythological layer is permeates through the other layers. How do we define good and bad? We learn from these stories. Aesop's fables would be an example of a more modern way of coming to this mythological layer.
Mm.
Um,
Would can
and then
would you
we
also incorporate in that, for example, like the common archetypes that we get in films or
what
movies that like, for example, the Marvel superheroes, that there's like an archetype.
yeah, yeah. Totally. Marvel superheroes, Disney, DCEU, all these Superman, Batman, they would fall into here because we give them values of humans that are larger in life to push forward a morality and it's both ways. We feed it and then it feeds us. This
Mm.
idea of how we're going to define good and bad.
Mm.
How do we do? Because this is such a layer so high up from ourselves that it filters through our communities and societies and our country's way of defining itself. It filters through to our parents and how our parents look at the world. And then it filters past our past lives, and then it filters inside us and becomes a part of who we are and how we look at the world.
Mm.
So definitely, I would include Marvel superheroes
Mm.
into this list. Yeah.
Yeah, or even the Olympics, like something like
Yeah,
the Olympics, and every nationality has certain heroes and certain legends within their own country.
yeah, I think the Olympics falls somewhere between the national perception and the myth, because even though Olympians win gold medals and they do push themselves to the greatest, we don't Olympians, we know that they don't have superpowers, right? They
Mm.
don't Michael Phelps just can't get angry and take out all the water from the pool because for whatever reason of something being unfair. So I would say no,
Okay.
not to the level of Olympians yet. This is very specifically mythological, like
Okay.
very specifically direct morality. So like Aesop's fables, and animals running a race, for example. Yeah, it fits in because animals don't really talk, but the whole purpose of that is to give us a value of right and wrong.
Mm.
Um, but Olympians, I wouldn't put them in this list.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and then I think that's the fourth layer. The fifth layer becomes our talk with ourselves. And I like to call it sentience because, like, sentience is a word usually reserved for robots
Yeah.
or AI. But I think it's when we start having a conversation with ourselves, we're taking our lessons from our experiences of life and we mix it with these conditioning values that we have, and we start now converging many different things together and start defining who we are, or I am and you are, he is, etc. We start now putting that definition of who I think I am and then start perceiving through that. So, you know, that becomes another big layer. And the final layer that I added in was the body. And I remember Keir talking about this, George Craig McMillan talking about this. I don't remember, I remember him only saying that the body is formidable, but then I started understanding what he meant, but more on the negative side. Formidable usually means like our body is strong and it can take a lot, and and our body talks to us, which all I agree with. But I actually started realizing the impact of it when I was injured,
Mm.
because when I was injured, it didn't matter how hard I tried to do my mindset. In pain, I was just being negative with the world, and the world was being feeding back that negativity to me. So the body is formidable
Mm.
because no matter how strong my mindset could be, with a constant pinch, you're just going to start behaving like somebody who has a pinch on their arm or a chip on their shoulder. I think that's the more common word. Um, a back pain that just doesn't go away. It makes you upset. It just makes you different. So, oh, so the body, yeah, the body matters. How the body feels, how it's working, its different systems. It's a formidable thing that can change how you perceive the world around you just by how your body is feeling. And so I put that as the sixth layer. And then we have what I like to call the neutral space, where there's that layer where nobody is perceiving anything. So I have six layers of perception. You have six layers of perception. And then we just have this empty space between us. So by the time I speak something and you hear something, we've gone to 13 different layers.
Mm.
And then you realize that, oh, that's maybe why it's not so difficult for people to misunderstand each other. And you take people from different cultures together, and you can see even more of a reason as to how difficult communication is, you know? Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting, and I think being able to break it down like that, and if there is difficulty in understanding one another, to kind of look at, well, what is the misunderstanding rather than the blame or who's wrong or right, because I think within each layer, of course, like just for the cultural or the physical or the like any of those things, if you two have, well, of course, you're going to have differences, and they could very easily lead to a misunderstanding that
Correct.
could look like a big confrontation if
Hmm.
you just took it at face value.
I think that's why it's important to understand where people come from, um, and 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 also to understand where you come from. Like if you're in a conflict situation, and not necessarily to always just like, I mean, sometimes people hear that and they're like, oh no, if you understand people, you're always going to give in to them, you don't have a
Mm,
understanding. I don't think that's true. I think by understanding where people come from and understanding where you come from and then understanding what you're trying to achieve, you can come to a better understanding of how to communicate out of a conflict. And then only if somebody is being completely unreasonable, then that's something else. And that's, you deal with that in the world. It's just what it is.
mm,
Um, some people just want to push their perceptions and beliefs on others, no matter what. And that, I mean, when you're around someone or something like that, I think you have to understand you're going to find yourself in a lot of toxicity,
Mm.
because we can live with each other without having to push our perceptive beliefs on one another. Mm.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And I think understanding yourself is also really key. A lot of the work I do is trying to get people to understand their own values and then
Yeah,
look at if they're living through them. Because as you've mentioned, like a lot of the things that we think, the things that we assume, the expectations that we have on ourselves and the world, they're not really even our own. They're just things we've
yep,
inherited, and they might not necessarily be serving us, or they might not even be useful, or what we would like if asked, say, this is what I agree with, but it's useful to explore our own values and understandings, and then try to
correct.
sort of separate them from what things you may have been told or may have just picked up from the environment that aren't actually particularly helpful.
Correct, correct. And I think when we can start understanding that about ourselves, and we don't use it as excuse. Oh yeah, my parents were like this, and
Mm,
my community was like that. You can use that to maybe be like, I can see now why I acted or I behaved that way, but then I don't have to stay there. I have my
mm,
own sentience. That's why I put sentience very high up, because your own understanding and perception can change all the others. If you understand, oh my God, the reason why I do this is because of this A B C D. My family was like this. Our culture taught me like this. I'll pick something a bit easy, like and I think it's still relevant in the world today, like patriarchy,
mm.
very built in. Uh, I find myself sometimes just acting like a dude and just be like, feet up, man spreading or whatever, and then being like, oh, see, as a child in my culture, men were very, treated higher level than you know what they used to say to people. What I actually heard this from an elderly person in my community, which said that men having a son is like having a um, debit account, I think, right? Where people give you money, like you collect, like bank savings. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Having a son is like a savings account, and
Mm.
having a daughter is like an expense account. Can you imagine that that seeded mentality of thinking that men are valuable and women are not from a baby, you
Yeah.
know? And so that permeates you. But then and so it also explains why I might have behaved in a certain way, because as growing up I may have been given more leeway or benefits that maybe my sisters might not have got.
Mm.
um, and then it starts to make me behave a certain way around women, that I catch myself, or that you know people around me will tell me, hey, you are behaving like this, and then I can choose to fight back. Nah, that. It's just this. But or I can just be like, all right, let's see where I get that from. Oh, I do. Okay, sentience level. We have the ability to change our mindset.
Mm.
And we don't use it. Some people think, oh yeah, because of this and this, and then it's almost as though that ingraining is stronger than your mind. It's not. Your mind is the strongest, most powerful thing in the world, I think, because we created all of our lives today through individual and then collective minds. Like our whole society is built based on imagination. Our technological advances come through imagination and mind first. So, we yeah, mindset is thoroughly, as much as there are books and speakers and stuff about it, I still believe it is under appreciated and undervalued
Mm.
at how powerful the mind is.
Yeah, I agree. I think the sentience, as you call it, it's like when you're aware of something,
Yes,
then you have an opportunity to do something about it. Like if you're not aware of it, it's going to be almost impossible, because it's just like the accepted reality. It's happening to you, not something that you're actually consciously involved in. And
correct.
even if you are aware of it, like that it's still not necessarily easy, because a lot of these things are just unconscious patterns that we've
Right,
built up over time. Like, oh, in this environment I behave like this, or when this trigger happens I react like that. It's
correct.
not like a conscious choice to do it, but like you say, I think there is potential to change. And because I what would people like trying to maybe change their thought patterns or the old stories they have about themselves. And absolutely it is possible, if you're aware of it, and also you have a willingness to do something around it as well. That's the real key thing, because it's usually uncomfortable and usually
Yep.
difficult. It's not like, oh, now I'm aware of it, it's easy to change. It's normally like, now I'm
No,
going to
no, I
have to
think
like
changing is
suffer a little bit, because it's going to be hard, and there'll be some
very difficult.
emotional yeah, usually emotional, maybe resistance or discomfort in trying to change.
And also don't discount habit. We
Yeah,
we are habitual beings, right? And so
exactly. Yeah.
changing a mindset is like changing a habit. You just have to change it. And the only way to change it is to constantly practice the new thing that you want to see it in.
Mm,
And it's not easy. I'll attest to that. It's not easy because it's very easy for us to just and go back to the old ways. It takes constant practice,
mm,
and then sometimes we overreach, like we want, like I am here and I want to be that, and then I will go so far out into the opposite side of the spectrum that I'm also like it's almost as though instead of having that conversation with the self and trying to understand the self, some people just move to, oh, I want to please that new group, and then just take the mindset and mentality of that new group and over incorporate it.
mm,
um, I find that I see that a lot, actually, but I don't want to pick specific examples. But I would say that I see that a lot in specifically in people who do politics, people who follow politics. Like
mm,
uh, suddenly everything changes, and they're like, well, no, no, now I define myself like this politically, so I'm going to take all of these thoughts politically and make them mine. And it's like, did you have like you're not, the concept of understanding your mind isn't just like, all right, I'm just going to move from A to from this set to this set. It's you have to really go through the process of getting to know yourself,
mm.
and you can't miss that process. The minute you miss that process, it's like a missed opportunity. You can go back and work. That's a beauty. As long as you have breath, you have the ability. You have, as a yoga teacher, like, of course, you talk to people with different professions or different perceptions. You're going to get that. So, as a yogi, do breath work, silences your mind, that breath of fire. Doing the stretch, it takes the distractions of the pains of the body, and do some mantra. It changes your vibrational frequency, and then connect deep inside to see how you are doing. And that's how I like to do it, and that's how I teach it,
Mm.
as a yoga teacher.
Yeah, I agree that it's useful to have some nuance around. If
Yep.
we discover something about ourselves that we don't like, it can be often, like you said, just the reactionary. I'll go to the opposite end of the spectrum,
Correct.
and that's not always useful. It's sometimes, because it's reacting, it's not responding. It's not like, and also that there's some instances that I think, I mean, I've seen it in working, I guess you'd call it the wellness industry, well-being. Many of these things are context specific. Like, for example, like one of the things, a friend of mine, he goes on about like these memes that you see on Instagram, and it's like you're good enough, like that, and in some sense that's true, and in some sense that's not true, and
Correct.
but it's kind of comforting, and that can be a really good thing, but it's also, it can be an excuse, because like for
Yeah.
my friend Richie, he always says, was Hitler good enough? Like, was he good? Would you have said, oh, he's good enough, just love yourself? Like, you wouldn't. It wouldn't. It's nonsensical.
Yes.
But it's used as a blanket statement that I think can keep people stuck if not
Yes.
applied within the correct context.
Well, you can always be good enough. You are good enough. You are like, like another thing, like you're talking about that, you hear like you are graceful, you are radiant, you are a wonderful being. It's
Mm,
all true, but you have you already have everything inside you that is the higher self. um, we are a collection of both the highest being, that is almost like a godly being in us already, and we
mm,
have everything that is the most deceptive, lying, you know asshole being inside us as well.
mm,
And it is in all of these extremes that we behave in, sometimes in the middle, sometimes more towards the higher self side, sometimes towards the lower self side, depending on each situation.
mm,
So you can say, yeah, you are good, but you are also evil.
mm,
you know you have the light of God in you, but you also have the darkness of the soul in you. I
mm,
mean, so these blanket statements, sometimes they're good reminders, especially, you feel down and you see a couple of these memes and you reconnect with that higher sense, and you're like, yeah, all right, you are good enough to do this. But if you use it as an excuse, then,
mm.
you know, I think the one that I see most people use as an excuse is, this is who I am. I think
Ah,
that is that is the worst form of excuse, because you're right, this is who you are, but who we are changes from moment to moment. So, work on this. We have a lifetime on 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 earth. We're born, we live, and then we die, and in
mm,
this lifetime we're incorporated and surrounded with various people, um, life, cities, jungles, etc. We get the ability sometimes to make our lives. We might feel stuck, but really, if we feel stuck, it's a failure of imagination. We can always come out of whatever prisons we feel we are in, just by learning how our mind works and ourselves. If I learn about myself and I see, all right, I see this about me, and you learn about yourself, and then you say, all right, what is the type of thing I want to do in this world? And you can use, if yoga isn't a tool for you, all right, there's so many other tools. There countless ends of tools. But the first thing is, you have to go through that process of self-discovery, and there's so many ways to do that. And when you do that, you're liberated, because you have chains and you don't have chains. You're free, but you also have limitations. We have sensorial things where we're free, but we are limited to our perceptions and our senses. I think it's it always comes back down to mindset. Are you open to change, or are you not?
mm.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really true. How it's not even mind over matter. I think like because I think the two are very much connected, but the intention and the beliefs we have. If I think I can't remember the exact Shakespeare quote. It's nothing is good or bad, but only thinking makes it so. Like the way that we approach something, um, and our ability to be open or not is going to help or discourage from the results that we get. Because I also have worked doing hypnosis, and people say, oh, is it true, is it not true, will it work, how come it works? And it's like, well, if somebody's actively resisting, then yeah, chances are it's not going to work. Like that's probably not going to work. Yeah, like newsflash, I'm not like a magician. Like, but if somebody's really bought into it, then yeah, it's most likely going to be beneficial. And then people say, oh well, so that means it's only to do with, you know, what you think, and that's not real. But it's actually like much deeper than that, because you can see with medical drugs like the placebo, and how the a saline pill can have almost the identical effect as an actual drug, just because somebody in a white coat and a stethoscope has told you, if you take this, this is going to be the result. And because we view that person as high status and we believe them and we kind of give them powers, then the body acts accordingly. So it's very fascinating, I think, somewhat misunderstood about how our openness and willingness to just be open to change, or to open to be curious and explore things, can literally transform everything.
Correct. Yeah, I totally agree with you with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and I think I hope that it will be better understood as like neuroscience and this kind of things progress.
I think also because we are learning more and more about the world, our scientific, tools. I mean, I think we're speaking now, after 2 billionaires, right, flew to space. So we are actually on the cusp of a new discovery for humankind, I think. I mean, and when we say the cusp, like, doesn't necessarily mean the next 6 months or 1 year, but the next 20 years should be very interesting for space exploration. And I mean, I like how we humans, really take a method and said, all right, we have a scientific method. We're going to put things together, and we're going to use this system to discover things we don't know. And I love that. I think the ability of us to do research, to take our perceptive abilities further is amazing. Like, we have sonar, we have radar, we have so many tools. I think that, like, we can even put a number to an earthquake. Like, this one was 5.8 on the Richter scale, and we can tell you what 5.8 on a Richter scale means. For us to actually understand it. I love that. I think it really goes to show, like, how much humans, like, we can get on we have a tool that we sit on and fly. We have this damn hand thing that tells us everything from the time to like connect us with people all over the world. So our potential is endless. And our only main thing in this world is to make sure we don't say no to the things we don't know about. We can't say this doesn't exist when we don't have the tools to measure it or not. So if we say, yeah, there is no spiritual realm because we cannot, we can't measure a spiritual realm, then the answer is really, we don't know if there's a spiritual realm, and we should find out. Because if we can take ourselves to space, maybe we can take ourselves to other dimensions in the future. I don't know. But because I feel like I've had various experiences internally that I cannot explain, and I would love to. Maybe one day far down the line, have somebody else be able to explain it in more easy terms. But the idea that somebody is a guardian of truth, is, and says this does not exist because we don't have the tools to measure it. It limits human potential. It limits who we are and where we can go, and it takes away our highest self for discovery. And I think humans are discoverers, so why should we take that away from ourselves ever? But that's just my way of viewing the world. Somebody else may digress and view it differently, and that's fine. That's their problem, not mine.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying, like that, like religion,
Yeah,
science and consumerism, and they're like the new religion almost.
yeah, they
And
are.
like
Yeah,
I remember thinking, because I'm kind of, I'd say I'm more, I'd say I'm agnostic, but I remember thinking about, in a bit of an arrogant way, to be honest, that oh, in England, we're so advanced because we're not under this belief, like it's not Christian. UK is not formally Christian. Like, if people might have that
right.
perception, but I'd say 80% of people are atheists there. Um,
Mm.
and I thought, oh, compared to the medieval times, um, or some more religious countries that exist right now, that this is some enlightenment. Yeah, you could argue for or against that. But then I realized that, like, just consumerism is our religion, and
Yes.
celebrities, they're our gods,
Yeah.
and the values that maybe were held true in Christianity. Of course, I'm not pretending that if you went back to the medieval times, people were living through the Christian values. I don't think they were, but should we say the moral compass of the religion that did affect society, that had kind of dissipated, and now we were just being led around by what was popular in Hollywood or what was popular within
Yeah.
usually America, to be honest. And I'm like, well, is this actually any better? I don't know. There are certain things, of course, I think having freedom is a good thing, but um, yeah, it seems, I think that we have some necessity as human beings to want or yearn for something bigger than ourselves, and
Right.
that you might say is spirituality. And if you just remove it and you don't replace it with anything, then
Yep.
it kind of becomes a bit nihilistic, or yeah, not very well, meaningless. Not to be overly dramatic about the situation, but I do think there is something, like, as a human, that we want to feel connected to something bigger than us.
Correct.
And with the removal of that and the very rational, scientific approach, which is useful in context, then you just get consumerism, and celebrities fill that void. And I can't pretend like that's necessarily better.
A couple of years ago here in Thailand, I don't know, maybe you can Google this. You can see Cristiano Ronaldo
Oh,
did
okay.
an ad for Shopee. Shopee.
Shopee, yeah.
Cristiano Ronaldo. Yeah, it's pathetic. But you know what? It helped Shopee.
Mm,
And Shopee is, if you're watching this from elsewhere, Shopee is like the Amazon for Thailand
yeah.
and Singapore. Um, and I mean, go see the ad. You can just Google it, Cristiano Ronaldo Shopee, and everything David is saying here about consumerism. That's what just came into my head. Like, yeah, we are celebrate. Consumerism is a very dangerous thing. If you are listening to this podcast, chances are that you're looking for something beyond, your mindless existence of just living a day-to-day life, getting up and buying stuff and then doing stuff, and then it's like you're so busy in the life and consumerism that you're so busy getting absolutely nothing done.
Mm,
And that's how I feel it. What is the new consumerism? I have a small house, I need to get to a bigger house. I have this laptop, I need a better laptop. I have a glass like this, I need another glass. Now, I'm gonna couple this with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm gonna throw this in here because I can understand for people who have nothing in this world to want to get material things. You need material things. We need a roof over our heads. We In today's world, we need running water. We, yes, not for everybody. Some people can be hermits and go live somewhere without running water. But for most of us living in our modern, current society, we have electricity, we have running water, we have, internet, computers. These are how we interact with the world today. To say that we don't need any of this stuff is BS. You want to wear good clothing that feels good on your skin, but you don't need the brand necessarily. You'd be amazed if you take away the idea of consumer. You step back and see, well, what is it that I want and need? And it's not bad to have wants. It's absolutely not bad to have wants, but you break it down into the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. And you might be surprised at what you find, because a lot of the stuff we feel we need is just noise. It's just noise and distracting us and keeping us in a cycle of consumerism. That you can, one thing I liked when about Kundalini Yoga in particular, about how Yogi Bhajan pushed forward with it, was he said you have to be that yogi and still live in the world. So he never encouraged his yogis to step out and to to form. I mean, they did almost form a cult. That's a different topic though. The all whites, yeah. But he encouraged them to have families, to have children. And I believe that. I think that's what, Guru Nanak said too, was you don't need to be outside of this world or completely throw ash on your body and say, I have nothing to do with Maya. No, you can live in this world and still be free by being aware, conscious beings. I like that about this yoga, and I feel that this yoga does bring a lot of that practice. And like I said at the start, it's very practical and very easy to incorporate into life. And without especially the mindset part. And yeah, I kind of lost my chain of thought there.
Yeah, you were just saying about the being able to live in the world, and that was encouraged specifically in Kundalini, and I think that's important, because I think it's like, how free are you? If like, in order to be free, I need absolute silence. I need to be on a beach. I need to like have this food. I need to have no distractions. And that's not freedom. That's just like it's escapism. And I think sometimes
it becomes a new excuse, man.
Yeah, I was obviously I was in Koh Phangan same time as you, and when and I saw that, this is not trying to be mean or critical of people, but I was talking to my friend there, and he was saying like, so and so was having a tough week, and I was like, why is that? And it was, because it's the full moon. I was like, if like, no, if your like biggest worry is the full moon, then you really haven't got many problems like that. Like, I just like, come on, there are people queuing up for food in Pattaya because they haven't got enough to eat, and you're having an off week because there's a full moon. Like, I just think like that is not being, in my opinion, that's not being spiritual. That's just being weak. Like, you need to be able to function in a world with not everything.
Mercury's in retrograde, David, don't you know? Mercury's in retrograde. Come on. Of course he's having a hard time. No.
And like, I don't want to sound like judgmental, but I was like, come on, man. Like, if
when you work,
you need to be able to be good in the world, and that's like not.
I'm gonna cut you a little bit here. I'm gonna say this. When you're working on the spiritual self, you're gonna find your sensitivities to things like changes in moon patterns, changes in planetary alignments. It's gonna affect you. I don't even want to say it's gonna affect you. You learn how they affect you, but you don't have to be hung up on it, man. There are ways around it. Do your prayers, do your meditations. That's the whole purpose. purpose of doing them is so that you're not affected by all that junk and that you
Mm.
can live your purpose. If you're going to sit there and be like, yeah, I've had a tough week because, Mercury was in retrograde or there was a full moon, adjust yourself accordingly. If you know that these full moon cycles don't serve you well, then find something that does. I mean, find a practice that does and be your best self. But don't sit there and tell David about, yeah, I had a tough week because the moon was bad. You know, you know what a tough week is? A tough week is a factory closing down. Pitchaboon, I think 3,000 people affected in a single factory for COVID, and the factory has to shut down. And these guys who make daily wages don't make a day's wage, and don't have money, don't have hospital beds, don't have anything because they got COVID now. That's a tough day, man. That's a tough week. That's a tough life. Don't be using these things. I mean, I hear them, and I'm in the spiritual world all the time, and I usually just smile through them, and I don't deny that there's nothing in astrology or numerology or stuff.
Mm.
I think there is, but personally, don't get hung up on it. Get yourself over it. Get yourself over yourself to use these things as excuses. Build yourself up so that these things don't affect you, and move forward. Otherwise, don't be in this field if you're just going to use it for excuses. The world needs us, needs people who are spiritually connected to push through and persevere during times of disease, not to hibernate and then to escape during these times. We got to push forward with what we can do, and it might not be a lot, but do it. Do something. Provide it for free if you have to for the time being, man. There's people who are really having a tough time out there, and don't be hung up. And I'm sorry to your friend. I don't mean to talk to him, but it just I see this a lot in the spiritual community, and that's not something that it's something. It's like you triggered me. Yeah, David, you triggered me. I'm joking, but I got that kind of it. I always feel that way around people in the spiritual when I hear this sort of stuff. I usually don't know if people are open to hearing me speak like this. So I usually just kind of keep quiet until I can see if I can say something that would be accepted, but this being a podcast out to nobody, yeah, man, don't get hung up on yourself. That's just being too like, oh yeah, I need these 5 crystals. Without them, my mind's gonna go crazy. No, none of that. None of that. No, don't that's all excuses. The crystals are beautiful and they will vibrate your soul and vibrate your energy, but you don't need them. You don't need anything.
Mm.
Not in this field, not with mantra, not with breath, not with your mind. You can do it without any of it. The rest is just window dressing.
Mm. Yeah, it's like Dumbo's magic feather.
Sorry?
Have you seen the film Dumbo, the Disney movie?
Yes, long time ago. He can
Okay.
fly if he holds on to the feather, right?
He has a magic feather that he believes is the
Yeah,
source of his power. And
right.
that like is I see that like we all do it in different ways, but when spirituality is misused or misapplied in that kind of way,
Correct.
it puts a lot of people off spirituality because they're like, oh, that's a load of nonsense. It doesn't because from the outside looking in, it just looks ridiculous. But I don't think that's actual proper spirituality, or it's a misappropriation of the intention of spirituality.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's a misappropriation of the understanding of spirituality. I see it a lot in the Kundalini Yoga field too. You got to tune in exactly with this mantra. You're going to do if you're doing the Aquarian sadhana, you have to do it exactly like this. I think we're past all that. I think right now we're creating new paths, new walks, and we're evolving. And we're in an age where we have to believe in ourselves and our own experiences, and not in the not a top-down sort of this person said something, that person made a statement, and like that's the past, man. We want to move to the future. We want to move forward. We have to understand the past. We have to understand the abuses that came with the systems of the past as we remove them and form new, more individual system, a revolutionary of individuals rather than like a revolution of like a system. Because we've seen from system to system revolution, we move from, You've seen everything from like capitalism from Cuba, for example, to Fidel Castro. All you end up doing is create a new elite, a
Mm,
new group of people in power. You know, you still have the rich and the poor, and you're not really giving people new mindset about their own infinite potential
mm.
and their own grace, their own radiance, and a focus on that rather than like we got to change everything. No, we've done the change everything. We've done it multiple times. We haven't really got there with that. We got to find a new approach. Maybe the new approach is individual, instead, and then see where we go from there.
Mm.
Independence
Yeah,
and
I
individual.
like that. It's where we have the most leverage
Yeah,
when we trying to like change everyone else, change. And I'm not denying that things need to change on a broader scale, and that we do need people that are willing to try and do that. But often
correct.
we're overlooking the most obvious, like,
Yeah,
maybe I could treat my mum a bit kinder, or
yeah,
maybe I
exactly.
could be a bit more responsible in my job, like just, or whatever it could be in your personal life, in your romantic life. All of these things that there's probably ways that we could all improve. Not probably, there are definitely ways that we could improve, and it becomes easy to externalize that and say, oh, the world needs to change before I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
And one other thing that I think is really doesn't get spoken about so much, but I believe like that rather than being a consumer, to try and be more of a creator. And that, by that
Yeah,
I mean creating your life, creating things, that ways of being of service to other people,
correct.
rather than just absorbing things and like looking for other people to tell you what to do. uh,
Correct.
to just create things, create your life, create your relationships, create uh, workshops, art, food,
Absolutely.
whatever it might be, to kind of give back rather than just be like this passive, I need to absorb stuff. And of course, there's a time and a place for that, but through trying, through putting it out there, that's we can learn more in like one day doing that than 100 days just in our bedroom, like not doing anything and just listening to stuff. And I think that's very undervalued in today's society, that like if you've got an idea or you want to change something, give it a go, see what happens. And from that you can learn, like from the act of creation, you're going to learn so much.
Agreed. Agreed. Totally. Yeah. And I think that's a good note to finish this podcast with too, right? That we have to be co-creators of the world around us. I love that you went there because it was, we have the ability to co-create reality. We do
Mm,
it in our own little ways. When everybody is doing it, you find that the bigger picture suddenly starts to change as well. So with that, I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful you said that because I find the practice of yoga to be very much about co-creation and about understanding our ability to be a positive change first for ourselves. I
mm,
know it sounds weird, but like if we don't love ourselves first, we don't give ourselves the ability to learn how to love others. I think because love of the self is very unique. You have to love yourself in spite of yourself. You can't escape yourself, right? So you
mm,
know everything about yourself, and to come to that feeling and then to pass that to the people around, then you have a real, like a very genuine, real place that you're connecting with people from, and you can start co-creating the world around you, and
mm,
that is a beautiful thing, especially this fabric where there's a lot of noise, a lot of media, a lot of sound, a lot of vibration to put us into anger. You open any political channel, I don't care which party, whatever it is, you open and you listen to their side, and it will make you angry about the other side.
mm.
These damn anti-science people, these damn thing, and the other side, these damn people who want to control me. It's like switch off, tune off, go
Mm.
go 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 deeper. You open media, and the media 24 hours news cycle, they need their ratings, otherwise you won't watch. So let's see, what can I make you scared about today? What should you be most worried about? And presented with, the thing to make you feel outraged so that you continue to tune in to that. You don't need to tune into that, turn it off. Anything that doesn't serve the higher self, you got to be aware of it. I mean, I'm on Twitter. I go and read all this bullshit just so that I know what I'm dealing with the world outside my bubble. But you gotta have that, but you gotta understand what it is for what it is, and build forward to co-create something better if you can. And yeah, do workshops. Do workshops if you feel like you are ready to share. Do workshops with someone else if you feel like you're ready to learn. I think take the process of going through it all to see what resonates and what works. And if you do that, you're going to start, and understand your perceptive abilities too. Hey, am I hung up on this? Wonder where it came from. Oh, yes. Okay. And then when you understand it, use that sentient layer to overcome it. You have that ability to. But you just have to overcome that inside you first and go forward. So I love that. Yeah.
So if people want to connect with you, Raj, where's the best place for them to do that?
The best place would be on Instagram, actually. My username on Instagram is very easy. It's hipster yogi in one word. Hipster yogi, no underscore, no nothing. Connect with me from there. It'll probably be the easiest way. There is a hipster yogi on Facebook too, but I think that was like a beard oil company. Unfortunately, it doesn't match. My Facebook way is Sky Yoga Bangkok, or just Raj Palsingh, and probably you will find me. But I think the easiest way is via Instagram. Or Twitter. Hipster yogi, same thing.
Hipster yogi.
Yeah.
Well, you look pretty hip, Raj. I was going to say.
Thank you. I think it's very. I used that name back in 2010. I think I thought, like, I was just getting into yoga at that point, and I didn't think that I was going to get deep into yoga. And so I took this website on WordPress called hipsteryogi.com, and I thought, well, that's a cool name. So I kept it in my Instagram as well, and my Twitter as well. And a few years later, like, my practice developed and stuff, and I stopped really like caring about where to get good coffee. Or, I mean, back then I used to want to go to the hippest coffee shop in town, the hippest place to do this or that. So it does have a start from there. And then I was gonna get rid of the name, and I thought, actually, you know what? It's kind of ironic that I'm holding on to this name, and if there's nothing more hipsterish than irony, so I'm keeping the name, and I just kept it.
I like it. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the bell button to be updated on all the latest videos. You can check me out on Instagram at David Bailey Life Coach.